So we're kind of rushing out of here now just because as I was talking to our southern neighbor, Border Patrol approached and said that that guy's a coyote. Look at his tattoos. He smuggles people across the border. So we're going to get the hell out of here now. I'm Katarina Schultz, and this is Borderland Dispatches, an Ironclad original. I'm here at the border wall in New Mexico. This has been a hotspot for smuggling humans, drug trafficking. A lot of it changed after Trump came into office, but I'm hearing from quite a few people that this remains a hotspot. You know, we've had 4 Border Patrol trucks already drive by past us at this point. I think this guy is probably going to come and want to know what we're doing. We're going to find out just exactly how this is going down, what's happening. We got a guy in a racer behind us here. Once you get to this part of the wall, you know, there's kind of a bridge here, and you can see the sign behind me. No trespassing. It's private property. The wall ends right before that mountain, and allegedly is where a lot of illegal border crossings happen. Today, I went to the U.S. Mexico border right in New Mexico, Anapra. Keep in mind, this is boots on the ground journalism. It's really as raw as it gets, and I always try my best to keep it as real as possible. So I'll tell you guys everything I saw, but let's get into some context, because since January of this year, since Trump came back into office, there have been new executive orders and policy changes that are directly impacting this border region, the southern border, that haven't really existed before. One of the first executive orders that was signed in Trump's administration was protecting the American people against invasion, which basically allowed for CBP, ICE, whoever, to expand rapid deportations, sending people back at basically undocumented numbers. This has been historical. We've been seeing a lot of these videos floating around on social media of ICE raids, of people being separated from their families, being sent back. And it's important to keep in mind that this executive order also denied federal funding to sanctuary jurisdictions, which were previously like safe havens for undocumented people. Now, with all this being said, the region of the border that I went to today is literally, or perhaps was, one of the largest hotspots for illegal border crossings. Why is this? Because at this Anapra border, there's a wall, and you'll see it in my footage. But the wall ends right before a mountainous region begins. And right there is where a lot of people were crossing over. There's human smuggling that's taking place, and of course, drug smuggling. Now, where the wall is on the American side, you're really kind of just in the desert. As I was walking there, the fixer that I was with literally told me, watch out for snakes, because it was my bright idea to wear a tennis skirt and frickin' flip-flops. Now, a second executive order was also signed right away as Trump stepped into office. This executive order is basically protecting the meaning of American citizenship, and it aimed to end birthright citizenship and a lot of other sort of not loopholes, but kind of gray areas in terms of status and visa. Now, this has obviously, as we know, been blocked by federal judges. But the reason I bring this up is because a lot of these actions, particularly in American politics and particularly with Trump's administration, kind of aim to set a principle. And of course, this principle rings true when it comes to the rhetoric around illegal border crossings. And let me tell you why. Because when I visited the border and I could see into the bedroom through a home window on the other side of the wall, on the Mexican side, there were 2 men that were there, and I went up to them and I said, what are you guys doing here? What's it like living in Juarez? Have you guys ever crossed over? You know, me and my yapper mouth, a million questions. So those guys that I was just talking to here, from the other side. They just whistled at us and are calling us over. I don't know if that's bad or good. Well, there's a Border Patrol vehicle coming down as I'm going over, so clearly it can't be that bad. He's trying to kind of get through the wall. Let me show you. Let's see. ¿Qué onda? ¿Qué quiere contar? ¿Quiere contar algo? Pues de todo. Es mi primera vez aquí.
One of the men came right up to the wall. He was kind of like squeezing through the, steel posts. And he told me that since January, he explicitly told me, since January, since Trump took office again, he hasn't seen people crossing. Also, on the American side, Border Patrol has amped up their freaking game. I mean, there is, as soon as I got there, there were like 4 CBP trucks right off the bat. And they obviously started to talk to us right away because who the hell are you? What are you doing here? And why are you filming with 1 million cameras?
So what's interesting here is, of course, this wall has been a major point of contention in American and Mexican politics. I would say even perhaps internationally, because American immigration policy and the way that they're dealing with their border has been something that everyone's been interested in. You can see behind me this big long wall, right on the other side, we got Juarez, Mexico. There's people living right there on the other side. There's homes. I can see clothes hanging. I'm being told by someone I'm here with today that a lot of high school kids in this New Mexico high school that's by the border wall are being recruited to smuggle people across the border. They're showing up at school with wads of cash, and everyone wants to know, how do I make that kind of money?
I also want to add that it is not purely Mexicans crossing illegally from Mexico into the United States. You have Venezuelans, Haitians, Chinese. Honestly, the list is endless. And typically when you go to these hotspot crossings, you will see discarded IDs and passports and documents that show and prove the point that there are extremely international people from halfway across the freaking world that are coming into Mexico to make their journey, their illegal journey, into the United States.
We've seen that official numbers from the U.S. and Mexican government have shown us that illegal border crossings and the influx of drugs coming across the U.S. Mexico border has gone down. Now, a lot of people, of course, and the reports are attributing this to Trump's administration, the crackdown, and also President Claudia Sheinbaum's administration. She sent an additional 10,000 troops to the border to crack down. This was pushed by the threat and action of tariffs. But of course, drugs are still getting across the border. People are still getting across the border. And I've said this before, but in order for us to really understand the amount and the number of drugs that are getting into the United States from this southern border, we'll have to wait. It really is a waiting game. And that's due to the fact that often a lot of the trap houses or people running the drug trade in the United States have a backup supply. So we don't know how much of the drugs that are on American streets right now are from the backup supply, from the southern border, or like I always say, the Canadian border. Because a lot of this is also coming through the northern border. And one thing I can be very clear about is that the US-Canada border does not look anything like this. It is miles and miles, one of the world's largest unprotected border of land that people can pretty easily cross through. And not to mention a lot of the drugs that are not coming across this border into the US that are coming from the northern border are simply being shipped across or brought across by Canadian mules that are extremely unsuspecting. Very different than what we see here. Here, there seems to be a type, and Border Patrol seems to know how to look for that type.
Now, 2 things here. First being, We know that multiple governments attribute the flow of fentanyl to Mexico. I certainly agree with attributing the flow of fentanyl to Mexican cartels. However, attributing it to them being it coming from that particular country, in my opinion, is a bit of a load of shit, because I've reported on this extensively, and I'm under the impression, due to the people I've talked to, what I've seen, what I've heard, a lot of the fentanyl in the United States, in Europe, even in Australia, is coming from Mexican cartels and associates based in Canada. I just want to go over those numbers really quick, because Canadian numbers and even American numbers, DEA website, state that less than 1% of fentanyl in the United States is coming from Canada. A Canadian law enforcement source of mine, who is extremely credible, has told me that less than 1% is seized at the border. It doesn't necessarily mean that less than 1% is moving in to the United States from Canada. There's two reasons for this. First being, no one has really, rang the alarms that so much fentanyl is coming in from Canada that it's being produced in Canada and moved internationally. And that's because Canadian law enforcement simply does not have the resources to deal with organized crime at that level, particularly when the Mexican cartels are overrunning the organized crime that's happening in Canada and working with local gangs. The second reason being, organized crime in Canada runs incredibly deep. And if we're only saying that 1% is crossing, it kind of lifts off this imaginary weight on Canadian law enforcement. And what do I mean when I say it's so deeply entrenched in Canada? Well, take Vancouver, for instance, a major port city. And the precursors for fentanyl are coming from China, and Vancouver has a major Chinese population and a major South Asian population, Indian people. These are a lot of people that are working and kind of controlling this port of Vancouver, and also could often be associates just due to the nature of the heritage of a lot of the major gangs in Canada that are operating directly with the Mexican cartels that have now taken over Canada. And look, the point isn't to make this about look away from the southern border and look at the northern border. The point is clear. It's that when all the focus is aimed in one direction and the other direction goes completely, there's no vigilance and everything is just off the radar, a lot more organized crime is going to happen there. And I've said this time and time again. Trump's first administration is what led Mexican cartels to move up into Canada and use that northern border as a proxy to avoid any detection, because it wasn't being radared. No one had their radar on this northern border. And now we may see this again, but twofold. Why? Because they're already there. They've already established their networks and they know how to operate. So if this means amping up operations, of course, that's exactly what's going to happen. Fentanyl is going to be produced in Canada more than ever before, and it's going to move into the United States through the north and disperse throughout all the networks within the United States.
So where I'm standing right now is a very prominent area for narco trafficking. Often here, we haven't gotten lucky or perhaps unlucky today. There are a lot of people on the lookout, punteros, scouts, looking out to make sure that law enforcement or other individuals are not interrupting their business, the narco trafficking. This border seems to be very locked down. You got this tall steel wall, and then behind me where the water goes through, you have, the razor sharp barbed wire. And typically there are members of the cartel here on their razors, scooting around, driving around, on the lookout. Right now, there seems to be a really heavy border patrol presence. I couldn't tell you if this is something new since Trump became president. I couldn't tell you if this is maybe just the day of the week that we're here. But it really does vary. You hear stories of Border Patrol being here and cracking down, no one gets across. And then there's other days where there's an influx, whether that be of people, of narcotics, or of even just general cartel presence associates here.
Numbers are telling the truth. The action has gone down, seizures have gone up, and people are scared. I mean, the price for crossing this border has basically doubled. You're paying the coyote double what you would have from compared to October, even December, let's say, which means people need more time to save up for that. Less people can afford it. And it's more of a gamble now. The Juarez-El Paso border is a strategic, economic, and criminal corridor. And the fall of the Juarez cartel and then the subsequent uprise of the Sinaloa cartel and now us sort of being in limbo with who is running all of this, what are the alliances, has left this critical area in a state of limbo, truth be told. Now, these bilateral relations, let's talk about U.S. and Mexico collaborating, have been really murky. We've seen this since the beginning of Trump's administration because he has in many ways tried to strong-arm the Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum. And to be completely honest, she, in a way, did her job at cracking down on the border. She sent additional troops. They really tried to crack down on fentanyl trafficking. However, when I was at the border, on the American side, like I said, lots of CBP, there was a helicopter radaring the area. But on the other side, I didn't see any Mexican military presence. There were no National Guard troops. Keep in mind, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's always like that. These are areas that are in flux. And particularly when we're talking about a nation that could be considered a bit strapped for resources, it's hard to say whether or not these guys are there all the time or they come during times where they think there's going to be a lot of activity, or they are there watching the area in a way that is under the radar. I don't want to speculate. What I do know is that there is along certain areas of the border a Mexican military presence. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be there, particularly when there was so much American law enforcement actively patrolling the area.
Right up here, we have a Border Patrol helicopter patrolling the area. Do you think that they found somebody? Maybe. It seems like they may have found somebody, or they're monitoring some sort of activity. Maybe a bit of a tough one for you guys to see, but there is a helicopter up there kind of hovering over the same area. You'll see helicopters in this area quite a bit. Obviously, it's Border Patrol patrolling the area, doing their jobs. But this appears like they may see some sort of activity, especially when they hover around the same area and they're kind of monitoring what's going on. It's kind of an indicator that something could be going down, or they may suspect that something is going down. You know, of course, despite the amount of Border Patrol that is in this area and the amount of activity you have going on here, certainly things are going to slip through the cracks. We know this because if they didn't, we wouldn't see illegal immigrants crossing the border. We wouldn't see the flow of deadly drugs into the United States from the southern border.
I'd also like to paint the picture a bit that this area is a very action-packed area. There's a lot of movement. You have the wall, and then on the American side, you also have a railroad where a lot of trucks with freight cargo are passing through. And actually, in 2002, two FBI agents who were investigating the theft of the cargo on these trains, because that also remains a major problem, is a lot of people will sort of cross over through where the wall ends and hijack the cargo on these freights. Now, two FBI agents in 2002 were investigating these thefts when they ran into people involved with organized crime. There was a shootout and one of the agents was killed in this altercation. It's always important to understand the context, to understand that perhaps these areas, when there is a crackdown, can settle down, the dust settles. But at other times, these are cartel hotspots. They're hotspots for organized crime. And why? Because it's incredibly freaking lucrative. I mean, human smuggling, drug trafficking, and freight, like cargo robbery. Really, when I say, and it rings true every time, that the cartel operates like a Fortune 500, this is just another one of their avenues to up their ante and to make more money in one of the most dangerous ways possible. Now, you may wonder why this area of the border is so important to the cartels, but also for the governments to crack down on. And you have to understand that the key trafficking routes that lead from Juarez into the United States lead into Dallas, Chicago, LA, and New York. I mean, come on. Four major cities also dealing with a major fentanyl addiction and overdose death crisis. If these are the key cities that are consumers of the flow of drugs exactly from this border that I was at today, this gives so much reason to the American federal government to crack down. But let's get into the nitty-gritty, because the border isn't where the crisis begins, it's where it spills over. And this is why the U.S. and Mexico have been having this sort of back and forth cat and mouse about bilateral actions that they've been taking. And let's look into that, right? Because the U.S. wanted Mexico to crack down on cartels and major operatives within Mexico. When Trump signed the executive order declaring Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, this was meant to target all of the people majorly involved in not only moving the money and drugs, but anyone who was associated with the cartels, helping their business, their operations run in any way or form. Because in order to really crack down and make sure that the border is not the aftermath of what's going on, you have to get to the root of the problem. And certainly the root of the problem starts with the plaza bosses, the jefes of the drug cartels, whether that's El Mayo, El Chapo, El Mencho, which is why we saw El Mayo end up in the United States. What's needed is a full-scale international reckoning. And we're sort of seeing the beginning of this, especially with the extradition of the 29 capos. That was really historical. I think a lot of people fail to understand that Mexico has never sent over 29 major capos in one day to the United States to face American justice on American soil. We have never seen this happen before. But this is exactly what's being done to stop the spillage at the border. Until we crack down on the very problem that lies on Mexican soil, whether that be finding those extermination death camps in Jalisco that are allegedly run by the CJNG, whether that's stopping the narco corridos from influencing young people to join cartels. And I'm not saying that I fully agree with that notion. I'm just saying that there are so many actions that are being taken, that are being considered, or that could be done, not just to stop this organized crime and cartel activity, because truth be told, I don't think that will ever happen, but to maybe lighten the blow. Because one thing is for sure, and I will say it time and time again, people are dying and people are suffering. And the human death toll and human suffering toll is not worth people looking the other way and keeping tight-lipped. I get calls every day from people around Mexico or people living in border towns who tell me about the absolute terror that they are enduring due to these organized crime groups. They are literally suffering at the hands of the very people that others are praising and singing about in their songs. The very people that are controlling the border crossings like the one I went to today.
So we're kind of rushing out of here now just because as I was talking to our southern neighbor, Border Patrol approached and said that guy's a coyote. Look at his tattoos. He smuggles people across the border. And I was literally asking him about human smuggling across the border. And then they showed me a new order from Trump administration that came out about a month ago that, you know, anyone that is here filming, drawing, talking to people on the other side could be searched and have everything. They didn't search us, actually. I was also really apologetic about it because I had no idea about that. But I did get really close to the guy that was on the other side of the border, and it was obviously bullshit because he started asking me, are you guys handing out toys? I have kids. And no, I'm not. I'm just filming. Well, what are you filming about? Are you filming about the smuggling? And I said, no. I just want to see this area. But it was good. 2 border patrol trucks actually pulled up to us at the same time and kind of told us, hey, you shouldn't be talking to that guy. And actually, you shouldn't be filming here at all. So we're going to get the hell out of here now. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Dispatches for Borderland. It's an Ironclad original. I'm Katarina Schultz. Stay tuned for more, and don't forget to like and subscribe.